So, Slater App. Let's just say Witt is the mastermind. I'm the idiot who is trying to promote this. So you might see my face a lot more, but Witt is in the Slack group answering people's questions. He's also making a lot more content. And he's actually a lot of the reason why there's this kind of Slater is linked to Kelly Slater, surfing the web. Witt, I believe, was one of the best surfers in the world. Isn't that right, Witt?
No. No.
But Witt he's a cool, chill dude, and a lot of the Slater branding is off Witt, which I love that fact. So it's an honor to have him here today. What the hell are we going to do in this session? We're going to look at why use custom code in Webflow projects. Let's just get that question out of the way. What are the problems with custom code in Webflow? How Edgar Allan did custom code before Slater, and we're going to do a little demo as to how you might use Slater within a Webflow project. So before we talk about Slater, let's just talk about why use custom code in your Webflow projects. So there's a number of use cases that you might use custom code within the Webflow projects, because obviously, as you guys know, you guys are all using Webflow regularly. It's a great platform, but there are some limitations, right? There's things that you might want to do in order to take your project from good to great. And there might be little things that just aren't quite right in Webflow. So for example, if you're trying to do sliders, multi-step forms, GSAP, or you might be using something like integrations from other platforms, then you might be wanting to use custom code. So that's essentially why, or what the limitations are with Webflow. The other thing is that there's a 10,000 character limit. So, if you're trying to do quite a lot of custom code, it's quite awkward. You're going to need to host that code somewhere else. And then the other thing to say is that you need to save, publish, check the code. The code's not working. Okay, why is the code not working? I can't tell because Webflow code editor doesn't tell me. So it's just a bit of a nightmare. So we've talked a little bit about the problems here, but the other things that we've not necessarily talked about yet is predictive typing. So if you're using code editors, normally you'd actually have the code editor would help you with the code. The other thing is that a lot of Webflowers, they don't actually know how to code very well, and they might want to learn a little bit of code, or at least know enough to be able to manipulate the code. So that's another really, really key thing about limitations within the Webflow code editor. So Witt, if I can hand it off to you, and maybe you could just talk a little bit about this project and limitations with that.
Yeah, so we did this project last year called Letter Run, which do you mind pulling up the site, Jack?
Yeah,
basically what we're trying to do, we got really into Blender and 3JS, and we were like, man, it'd be amazing if we could work in those, but also use Webflow as like the presentation layer for things like interactions, notifications, collection items, things like that. And it was hard. Like, it was very, very difficult to get everything kind of talking to each other. And we were writing a ton of custom code because we built the game part of Letter Run in React. And then, kind of went into, again, that presentation layer in Webflow. So everything was kind of talking to each other. It's probably going to be super laggy over a stream, but you can kind of get a sense for it. But all that to say, like, we were doing a lot of this stuff where we were trying to really build off of the stuff that Webflow is really good at, which is like a ton of stuff. But we wanted to extend it beyond what some of the limitations were using code, using React, using JavaScript, whatever. So we had gone through this whole process of kind of like mapping all this stuff out, writing all this code. Then we wrote kind of like intermediary code to get React talking to the game to Webflow, and like triggering interactions and stuff. And it was painful. Like, it took forever. And so we started looking at ways to kind of handle, like Jack was saying, if you're writing custom code directly in Webflow, as you write it, you have to publish it each time you want to preview it and see if it works, and you can console log and do stuff like that. But it was rough. So we had started doing some stuff where we were writing code in VS Code and then pushing that up to basically like a hosted spot. And it took so long. And so Jared, who is kind of our head of technical product stuff at Edgar Allen, had an idea saying like, man, we've got there's all these new tools that we can leverage, and it would be really great some sort of way to write custom code for Webflow in a way that you could deploy and test and not have to go through publishing the entire site every time, but also, hosting scripts, hosting assets, things like that. And that was kind of where that, initial idea for Slater came from, was like, we love Webflow. Like, first and foremost, Webflow is Webflow got me back into development just because the stuff that I didn't like to do from when I was doing coding in like 2005, I could do it visually, and I love working visually. So it was like, okay, we already got that, but what if we take this other thing and we can, kind of build off on top of it. So that was kind of like the whole point, was to do that. And talking about that, we started saying, well, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Before you
shoot.
continue, I think it's so cool what you're saying, that Webflow got you into coding.
Totally. Yeah.
Again, because it's so interesting to see the two sides of the coin. Like, for developers, Webflow kind of like encouraged them to go back into code, and then for designers, it kind of like taught them how to code.
Absolutely.
So such a cool thing. Like, I never heard that before.
Yeah, it's when we were at Webflow Conf last year, I was talking to Jess Rosenberg and just saying how, one of the things that I got from Webflow when I started using it, I think the first time I ever opened it up was probably 2014.
Okay, I guess. Am I the only one not listening?
I want to be developed.
No, it looks like Witt's frozen.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, we can hear you. I think Witt got frozen for a while there. So I was talking to Jess.
And Witt's back.
Am I back?
Witt, you're back. Oh, was back. Okay, I'll cover for Witt. I think we've teed up Slater. You guys are now like, okay, we like Webflow. We all get that. We all know that there's a little bit of a problem with custom code, and there's people that are in the Webflow space now trying to push their websites a little bit further. So I think what we should do is now show you guys a little bit more about Slater and dive in. Witt,
am I back?
You're back. And
okay.
You're looking great. You were kind of frozen in a really odd, quite aggressive stance.
I feel like that happens to me when I freeze. It's always at like the worst possible view.
It's cool. It's cool. I was going to screenshot, but then you came back, sadly. Sadly. Sorry. I mean, it's great that you're back.
Before we dive back into it, I just wanted to piggyback off, Melissa, what you were saying. We were like, what if you had something for writing JavaScript that makes it feel kind of like Webflow feels to use, like something that can kind of get you excited about it, help you understand why it works, how you approach different problems and things like that. And so, the no-code approach. We love code when we use it to extend. How do we make it feel more like the thing that we already love?
Comprende.
Yeah,
that's
Witt. So amazing.
I need that on a t-shirt.
We could.
Yeah, for real, the merch shop.
The merch is inbound, and I'm going to be at Chicago Webflow Conf with loads of Slater merch. So if you guys are coming to that, come find me. Okay, Witt, are you all right to do a little demo now?
Yeah, absolutely.
While you're doing that, in the chat, I want to know who is using Slater, who's dived in. I'd be intrigued to know, like, if you guys have any questions about Slater, like while Witt's doing this live stream, even if you're watching the live stream and you're like, oh, I'm a little bit shy and I don't want to come off mute, and that's totally fine. You can just ask a question in the chat, and we can deal with that. But we don't want this to be like, just a talk at you.
Right.
Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to get involved. Jeff says, I friggin' love Slater. We friggin' love you, Jeff. We talked about you loads in the EA Slack. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Witt,
and Jeff, you got me loving Rive, so that I would never have gotten into that without you. I was a Lottie guy, and now I'm like, man, Lottie what? So, cool. So yeah, and I definitely don't want this to just be me like talking at y'all. So what I like to do when we do demos on this stuff is just go through kind of like practical examples of things that like we've used in our own projects. Y'all let me know if I freeze too.
Wait, I don't think you're sharing Slater yet.
I'm not yet.
Okay.
No. But what I was going to say is what we like to do when we do demos is do something practical that's like something that we've done for clients. And then we'll do something that's just a little like weirder, because the reality of it is via the Slater interface, you've got access to basically any external library you would want to use. It has awareness of documentation of different APIs and stuff like that. So it's, kind of sky's the limit on some of it. And one of the things I'll do sometimes is if there's a particular problem I'm trying to solve is ask it how maybe to approach it. So, there's a lot of different ways you can use this stuff.
Yeah. I just ask you that explain it like if you're explaining it to a 3-year-old, because my writing of code is not very good looking. So
yeah, no, totally. Totally. And we're still very actively like, working on the UI. So, if any of you get in and you start using this, you have any feedback, you have any ideas, we are wide open to that stuff. We love it. We've integrated a ton of suggestions from the community. So what I'm going to do, and just kind of get you oriented, the way that it's set up is similar to different development tools. We're actually working to kind of get it more aligned to the Webflow UI, so it's a little bit more familiar, for lack of a better term. But generally, you kind of have it set up where you have your panel over here. You've got the ability to host CSS and generate CSS, JavaScript. We're working on a community library, which will basically let you write code snippets or take code snippets that you've used and submit them, things like that. But for what we're going to do right now, I just want to show you some of the JavaScript stuff. So I've got this Learn panel over here. Essentially what this is a chat bot like ChatGPT or Bard or any of those. And I'm going to drag this out. And is this like, can y'all see this okay?
Looks good.
Okay, great. So I'm going to say, one of the things that we've run into, let's switch over to Webflow real quick, is having things like blog collections, image galleries, things like that, where we want to do basically like an interaction, but we want to do it a little bit differently than a native Webflow interaction. Because I personally love using GSAP, which is an animation library that has been around since Flash. But it's not always super easy to kind of get everything hooked up until we started, working with Slater. So on here, what I'm going to do is go over to my chat bot and I'll say, please. I always start with please, just in case things go sideways with AI. They'd be like, this guy was polite. Please help me create a staggered animation for collection items. And then we'll want to give this like a class, like we give a class to anything in Webflow. So we'll say with class name, I'm just going to be really literal. So collection item. So please help me create a staggered animation for collection items with class name collection item as they become visible in the browser. I'd like the transition to happen over 1 second and offset the stagger by like 100 milliseconds. And so some of this stuff is like the thing with prompting, if you've used GPT or any of these other things, it's really just about describing. I'm coming at this just kind of in the interest of time and saying like, okay, this is, you know, how I want it to do. I want a staggered animation. I know I want to use GSAP, and then I'll send that on over. The more specific you can be about what you're trying to do, the quicker you'll get to kind of what you're after. But you can also go, you know, more generic and say, hey, you know, I'd like to create a staggered animation. How might I do that? And then it can kind of give you some stuff. It's not always necessarily going to steer you towards GSAP because there's a bunch of different animation libraries out there. But you can see it's over here creating the code for us. And so we'll look at this little snippet once it finishes.
Witt, can I just jump in here while we're doing this? Another thing that's really important to say as well is that if you want the explanations to be written in French or Korean or Hungarian or whatever, you can do that by just asking Slater to speak to you in whatever language. So that's something that's just important to highlight as well. And to Jeff's question about which ChatGPT you can use, there's a little cog in the top right. Were you about to show that, Witt? Sorry.
Yeah, that is.
Your thunder.
Yeah. So, and you can actually in the system prompt, this may be a beta feature right now, I'm not totally sure, but you can actually specify a language in the system prompt also. We're going to work on getting that set up towards more like a drop down kind of toggle setup for that, if there's like a, you know, language you want to work in.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So what it's going to do is it takes my question, just like you've seen in GPT. It's going to say, okay, here you go. First, we need to include the GSAP library. It'll generally give you a link to this content, you know, so you can grab the HTML script tag to bring in there. And I'll show you where to put all this stuff in just a sec. But this is the code that it's written. So I'm going to copy this straight over into, this is the panel where you kind of like write and edit. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. And you can save it via, we got some short keys set up, but you can also just use the menu. And then next thing I'm going to do is grab my script down here, and I copy this. And I just go back over to Webflow. And I always put these generally before the body tag, close body tag. So drop that in there. And that is what makes the connection between the two. And so then the next thing I want to make sure that I've got is for these collection items that I have a class on here called collection item. And I'm going to go ahead and publish this. Now, one thing to kind of point out is that this, just like any other chat bot, AI bot that you've ever worked with, you know, regardless of your level of familiarity with it, it really is kind of like a dance, like a dialogue. So sometimes when you get the output, the first output, it doesn't always necessarily work on the very first time. And sometimes there's some back and forth and tweaking that needs to happen. In this case, it actually did work on the very first time. So now with just that one prompt and that one answer, I have this animation that is using GSAP to create those staggered animations. Does that, I don't know if anyone has, does anyone want to like tweak this at all, or any ideas on how we might want to adjust it?
John has just said, he said, Inspector on the left, madman.
I'm only doing it because I'm streaming. Typically it's me off on the other monitor, but yes, I like to live dangerously.
I am absolutely dumbfounded because I love GSAP, but I don't know how to code. So this is like the product perfect for me, or I know very little code.
It really, not to interrupt it, but it really lets, I mean, my experience with it is that in the same way that Webflow has gotten me back excited about developing and designing and building websites, this has got me excited about code, because again, like you can see over here, what it's doing is, you know, you get the script, you get the script source, but it also explains why it's doing what it's doing and how it's doing what it's doing.
Yeah.
And you can actually flip it too. So like say you got something that came back and it didn't work exactly right. You know, I could say like, okay, and again, please and thank you always. So I say, thanks. Let's adjust the offset time for stagger to, let's do 300 milliseconds. And I only want this to fire when the item is visible in the browser, because it looked like it was actually firing on everything. It'll retain knowledge of what it has kind of given you back, like as far as the answer. And then when you resubmit, it's going to say, okay, cool. So I already know what I gave you. Now you're telling me what you want to adjust. I'm not even working in this, right? I'm basically just engaging with the bot and saying, hey, you know, that's great. Thank you very much. I'd like to adjust it like this. And it's going to go through, find the spots. You can see when the code finishes, but you can see that there's a 300 millisecond offset in there.
Another thing to say as well, you can actually highlight particular lines of code and then click explain code, which is on the top right next to debug code.
Yeah.
So because I'm not like Melissa, I'm not very confident with code at all. And I'm like, okay, I want to manipulate this code, but I don't even know how to prompt it. Like, I don't know specifically enough what I want to prompt. Like, I don't know the terminology and stuff. So I'll just highlight whatever line of code that I'm trying to understand and just say explain code.
Yeah.
And that way, I'll know then what to specify that I need to manipulate, right? Like, I might just be like, okay, just like Witt's doing, right? I just want you to explain what the hell this means in baby language. Yeah. And then I can actually go from there. So that's another thing to say, that you might have like a very specific idea of where you want Slater to get you to, but also you might just be like, hey, I've got like a rough idea of what I want. Can you just like, let's just go like, explain me what you're giving me, and then I can work out more specifically what I want. So you don't need Slater to be like, okay, I've got a super specific thing and I need this to happen. Slater, go. Slater's really, really good at that. But also you can be like, hey, I've got this rough idea. What's the best way of approaching this? Like, you know, is there a library where I can do fireworks? I needed that for this game that I was trying to do a creation for. It's like, I don't know, libraries for fireworks. Can you just help me? Like, just recommend me some libraries for fireworks, or, you know, something that's a lot broader as well. So I think that's just really, really important to say that, you know, Witt's got a really, really specific thing that he's trying to achieve. Slater can help you do that, obviously. But also you can use it to like teach you stuff and also give you different options so that then you can decide what you want to do from there.
Yeah, it's really cool too, because it's like you really can get into a conversation with it where it's like, okay, this is what I want to do. And you know, again, like Jack said, I'm coming in very specific. Some of that because I've like done these demos a bunch and it's just like where I go. But you can, you know, there's times where I'm saying, okay, abstractly, this is what I'm after. How might I approach it? And it might say, hey, you should check out GSAP. You should check out P5. You should check out 3JS, like whatever all these different libraries are. But it really is like, even for this, where I was just saying, what does the following code do? And it's explaining variable declaration in a way that is like very, very easy to understand. So you can, you know, you can get the output. You can even, I mean, there's times where I've found stuff that got me 85, 90% of the way to what I was after on, say, Stack Overflow or something. And you bring that code in, you can paste the code in and have it actually manipulate that. So yeah, it's really powerful.
Okay, so let's try one thing.
Okay.
Somebody dropped here. Can GSAP make a ripple effect when you hover over each item? Let's see if we can try that first, and then we can go into more questions. Diego, I think it's like exploding with questions. So
oh yeah, all good. I love it. No, I love it, man. I love it. And
yeah, but yeah, like other people are making questions.
He's like,
so
let's
just
test
like,
this. I think let's go. Let's
give it a go. And Diego,
let's try.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, Diego, like if you get into this and you want to talk through anything, I'm on Twitter. You can jump in the Slater Slack. Like we're here to like help figure out how best to use it. And there's a ton of ways to use it. So let's see. When you hover over a collection item, and the truth be told, when I'm asking this prompt, I don't know. I have no idea. So let's see. We're gonna figure this out together. Oh, all right. So loop through each item. Okay, so this may not be a ripple effect. This may be like I don't know that it'll look like a liquid ripple overlay, but it might be like
whatever. I mean, whatever type of ripple. We're not.
Yeah. Okay.
Guys, if this works, it's over for you all.
All right, so we're gonna paste that in. I'm gonna save that. I'm using my shortcuts, but again, you just save. You can save it. We maintain a copy on what we call dev and production. Dev is a little faster. Production is a little more stable. Both work well. It's just kind of like if you're iterating really fast, sometimes you might just want to push it to dev. So, all right, let's see. I got my fingers crossed over here. All right. I mean, that's like not really ripple, but
yeah, like it's like
maybe use the exact wording that you just used. Where you said liquid. What did you say?
So
liquid ripple
liquid
overlay.
ripple.
That
with displacement maps. So this would be different for sure. Let's see. I'll show an example in just a sec of something. I love to just make random interactive art with this. And it's really fun for that. It's a really good way to get used to or get familiar with different external libraries too.
But this is interesting. So I basically, it's telling you this is what you need in order to create that. So once you build that, then you can apply this code, right?
Yeah, let's just try it. I mean, let's just see if it works. So I'll put it in an embed. So let's see. We'll add a code embed over here. This is a really fun one. So thank you, Diego. I'm very into figuring this stuff out on the fly. And if it doesn't work,
It was actually Eric, but Diego's coming after, and Diego is a little heavy hitter here.
Right
so
on.
Get ready.
Right on. All right. Okay, so now I'll grab that. I've got that in my embed. And let's paste that on there. We'll deploy it. And then I need to publish this because I just added. And I tend to work. We have an app that you can use in Webflow from via their app platform. I personally just tend to work separately because I spread all of my stuff out so much.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth checking that out too. All right, so let's see. Moment of truth. Fingers crossed. God. Whoa! All right. Well, that's a ripple.
Oh god!
Oh gosh!
Oh yikes! This is giving me a headache.
I mean, that's a little bit, but it gave us something that works. Yeah. It gave us something.
Well, but it works, I guess.
Yeah. So let's see. Okay. So let's see if we can tweak it. Can we make it a bit smoother and only fire when I'm hovering over a single item?
Oh, wait. Gabs does have a point. Use the embed inside the item and not in the whole body.
Oh.
But if it's a collection, wouldn't it be in the rich text?
Let me just see if I can put it inside of the hang on, let me just see if I can do this because that actually should in an individual item.
Yeah,
drop that in there, I'm just not going to style it, but
Yeah, that's fine.
That's a great suggestion. All right, so let's see.
Oh, absolute. Maybe put it absolute so we can see it.
You got it.
And then make sure that the index is correct.
Yep. So we'll do position absolute. We'll make the index like 20.
That impressive you, but for like me, I'm just like, I would never have even thought of using an SVG filter in that way, and that's where like asking an open-ended question is kind of cool, because it's like, here's how I would approach it, and you're like, wait, what? You can do that? And then you try it, and then it's pretty insane.
Yeah. So I just asked it if we could make the ripples radiate out from the center, and it's basically like, no, not with SVG filters and GSAP, but you could do this. So anyway, you can kind of get a sense of, you know, how you interact with it and how the dialogue goes. For me, the coolest thing with this stuff is speed. So like, obviously it can explain code to you. It can help you solve problems with code. But being that it's all kind of integrated and that we host the scripts and we deploy the scripts straight from this browser-based thing, it just is. You know, we were using GitHub and VS Code and Netlify and all these different things that worked, but they were multi-step, and even then it would take a little while to get stuff up. And this is it's much snappier. So,
wow.
There's a few more
Diego,
questions coming
let's
in.
go.
Yeah,
he's rubbing his hands.
All right, I can't see anybody. I'm like, I have to look real quick because I just want to see. All right, I missed the hand rubbing, but that's
all right. Okay. So, well, I'm pretty used to like use custom code with my projects.
Witt's doing stuff. There's a few other things that I think are worth pointing out. Oh, sorry.
Diego was he was asking a question.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, you can go first, Jack. Please. Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you go ahead, Diego, and Jack. We'll get Jack to chime in after we start trying to figure this out.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, like I was saying, like I'm pretty used to use custom code on all my projects. And when I need to do something more advanced that needs to live outside Webflow, I usually use Code Sandbox. So like it's inevitable to try to compare like the workflow using Code Sandbox and what can be done with Code Sandbox with Slater. So I can try to figure out where Slater is like in between like coding right straight on in Webflow and coding in Code Sandbox or VS Code or whatever. So I'm just trying to figure out here what are the possibilities with Slater.
Sure. Yeah, totally. So I think one thing sorry, for your project, it's pretty magic. So that's one out of the gate difference.
Nice.
Can I add to that as well? There's a few other things that I think are quite important to mention. Is that one thing? There's a community library that we're working on. So imagine all different, Webflowers adding to this community library of code that is specifically for like Webflow related problems. So essentially, we're trying to build like a kind of Wikipedia of Webflowers with custom code for their specific projects. So that's something that's also quite handy, is that soon you'll be able to just drag in code that are like commonly related bits of code snippets that you might need for your Webflow projects, which I think is pretty exciting. The team invites feature as well is another thing that we haven't really talked about yet, but obviously within Webflow, it's kind of hard to do, multiple people doing that. I know that Code Sandbox and other things, that is a feature there, but that's just another thing that we haven't really talked about yet. But it's really, really important for Slater to work for, a Webflow agency or whatever. And then the other thing as well is that, how with your, Webflow project, you transfer that to your client and the client would start paying for that. Well, there's transfer code feature within Slater. So what you can do is transfer that code, but then still have access to it if you wanted to update that code for your client. So I think something that's really, really important to highlight is that Slater is not just, it's like an AI coding tool, right? It's built by the leading Webflow agency for Webflowers that want to supercharge their projects with custom code. Like, this isn't just a kind of, this is another coding tool. Now, there are obviously other coding tools out there, right? And AI in code is not an original idea in comparison to, something truly unique. But the fact that this is like super streamlined for Webflowers, built by Webflowers, I think gives it quite a unique edge in the sense that, it's for you, built by you, built with you. And these types of live streams are so vital to get feedback and important questions like that, Diego, which is like, yeah, but who cares? Like, why is this for me? That's why this is for you, because you're a Webflower and this is for Webflowers, built by Webflowers, with Webflowers.
Ooh.
Nice. Well said.
Nice.
So. Yeah, deserve an applause.
Okay.
So let's get serious. That's that was just my intro. Now, let's say I have a project with tons of code. And, I can't stand looking at that much code in just one single file. So let's talk about code splitting. Is it possible to have code splitting with Slater? For example, when you're working with AS6 modules where you can import files inside files or something like that. I don't know if the snippets are something similar to this. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what's possible here with Slater. Can I split my code into multiple files and I don't know, maybe import them into each other and just include one file into Slater and one file into Webflow and Slater does all the magic?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying with the single script. It's not exactly the same as using imports, but what it's doing is it's taking your sitemap for a published site, saying we know that we have these pages within this project. It gives you the ability to map your individual pieces of code to those specific pages. And then, like you said, I mean, you put one single script. Like if it's truly a global thing, you could just put it in your project settings and custom code, and it will distribute the code, as you need within the project. But it's not exactly the same as using imports and external files and things like that. We did that kind of on purpose because it's really this is really geared towards people who aren't coming from a heavy development background. This is people that are, love Webflow and are really trying to kind of maybe, dip their foot in code. I mean, I have a background in development and I use this all the time. But I wouldn't say I'm a hardcore developer at all. So for me, it's as much about the learning and the simplicity as it is, the actual output.
Okay. So let's say a workflow where I use Node.js and modules coming from npm and things like that.
Yeah,
that's not possible yet with Slater, but like it's a different approach with Slater, right?
Well, it's not that it's not possible, it's just that it's not set up for that. Like we could, like, you could import external JavaScript code into Slater today. Like there's no way to add external scripts in this interface then import. Like if you had say you had a library that you'd already developed that you wanted to import into Slater that was hosted on S3, you could import that, access that within Slater, and have Slater work with that. But it's not exactly like just working with command line tools and things like that.
Nice. Okay, and like, what about 3JS? Like, first, I want to see something done with 3JS.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it.
And second, one thing that I always find challenging with 3JS is like, you model something on a 3D software, for example, Blender. So I model something on Blender, I create my scene there, I have some animations there, and I want to use that with 3JS in my Webflow website. But it's a file. I need to host that file somewhere. Is it possible to host assets inside Slater right now?
That is a feature that we're actively looking at adding right now, because that's something that came up with the game challenge that we did. And JP actually showed us he was using Cloudflare to host some audio assets and things like that. But I mean, the reality of it is like, you know, this stuff goes up to an S3 bucket, so it's accessible, CDN, all that. There's no reason that we couldn't incorporate the ability to, you know, not only reference the files that are needed. Say you need audio for a game, or you need some video stuff for whatever, in that same instance. I'm glad you brought up 3JS though, because that was what we worked in. We worked on Letter Run, and man, if we had this when we were doing Letter Run, we probably would have sped up our development time by half at least. Nice. So, all right. So in this case, let's see. I'll make a new JavaScript file. We're gonna make this.
Let's get with the examples. Everybody's like, okay, but where are the examples?
I know. I'm sorry. I just love talking through this stuff. All right. So I've got my clean file. I'm gonna go ahead and say. So one of the things that
I want to record it because I'm sharing a.
Lisa, you're muted.
Did we lose her?
I'm muted?
Oh.
Well, it sounds like we can listen to you now.
Oh, okay. No, I'm recording this for Instagram too, so I just wanted to record this little piece that you're about to do. So go ahead.
All right, awesome. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna say, like, let's say, please help me create. I like sometimes to make shapes of shapes. So let's see. I'm gonna make please help me create a cube, 3D cube, made up of smaller multicolored spheres that I can orbit around using 3JS. So let's see what this gives us. I guess I need a yeah, all right. So one of the things that has been really cool with this is like there's that process of going through and saying, hey, this is generally what I'm trying to do. What are some libraries that I should look at that you can get that back from, from Slater. And then it really generally has awareness of documentation of a lot of these libraries like D3, P5, 3JS, GSAP. It's really good at writing API code, like to fetch data from APIs. So it's kind of like, I would encourage all of you that are on the stream right now to check it out and go in there and just see what you can think up and see if you can do it. Because I think generally the answer is going to be that you're able to. All right, so I've got my 3 code. Make sure this looks good. So I'll drop this in here, save it, deploy it, and then I need to grab my script since this is a new file. Copy that over to Webflow. And I'll just drop it in here at the bottom. And give this a publish.
Dude, if this works.
Let's see. All right, so this did not work. So let's see what we got. 3 is not a constructor. All right, so I'll go back in here, say I'm getting an error that 3 is not a constructor. And if we aren't able to get this going on the stream, I'll show you a couple that I've made using the same technique. Let's see, it's a namespace for the classes. Okay, so it's going to correct the code now based on what it just wrote. And again, this is kind of what we're talking about, that dance of saying, all right, this didn't quite work, or this isn't quite what I'm after, and then refining the prompts. And I mean, prompting, to me, it's like you have creative brief that you're given to a designer or developer and saying, hey, this is what I'm after. So it's really just about being really good at describing and also asking really good questions. So like, even if you don't necessarily know what it is you're trying to do, if you have a good question that can kind of like put you on that path, generally you can start to kind of dial in from there. All right, so let's try this. And drop that up. And there we go. All right, cool. So now we have a 3D cube that we can go in and out. Yeah. All right, now, but this is kind of flat, right? It's like, doesn't really have anything. So let's say, okay, thank you. It's a bit flat. Can we add some light and shadow
to make
it glass? Oh, glass shaders are actually really tough. Let me try this first. Let's see if I can do glass.
Can we also make it like, I don't know, make the cube like do some rotation on scroll? Because like, I know everyone knows that I love scroll-based interactions, so I would love to see something like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. So, and can we also monitor the scroll wheel and rotate the cube if it's being scrolled? So let's see what this gives us. All right. It's funny too, because we have it set up to be very conversational. So it's like, sure, certainly, we got you. All right.
I love that because it makes it so human.
Yeah, it really does. It feels, you get into this push-pull, like I said, this dance, and it really does. It feels very helpful also.
Yeah. Oh my God.
All right.
So exciting, guys.
It really is fun. I mean, it's, I'm biased because I'm working on it like constantly, but it's really fun to see what you can come up with. And particularly in the context of, using this in Webflow, it can, it has access to the Webflow API, things like that. So, okay, so let's see. We got some new code here. Push that up. Let's see. Okay, so now we got some shadow, and now I'm scrolling, and so it's going to rotate it based on scroll. And I'm way in there now, but let me close that. But yeah, so I can grab it. I can manipulate it. I've got nice shadows in there. Now my light right now is shining on just one surface, so there's like a dark cube, but that's like a pretty satisfying little interaction there. And that took what, like 10 minutes?
What, less than that?
Yeah, less than
that.
What
do you think?
Yeah, love this.
Yeah, same. That's crazy, man.
Yeah. So it's really fun. It's like even if you're coming in cold, JavaScript can be kind of intimidating if you don't have any familiarity with it. But it's really, really good at helping you understand why it approaches the problem the way it does, but also why it's taking the steps that it does. And then you can take that information and use that to make better prompts to get to quicker results. So,
wow. Okay. Does anybody else have questions? Diego, do you have more questions, or anybody else? Jeff asks, I'm not familiar with Three.js, but did you have to load a library somewhere?
I did. Yeah, I did load a library, and actually it gave me, let me show you real quick. Sorry, I just like seeing y'all. So it actually, when I asked the original prompt, it gives you the scripts for the orbit control and the Three.js library. So that's already in there. I had it preloaded just because sometimes, just like with any other AI platform, it will hallucinate a file path. So it'll point you towards something that doesn't necessarily exist. But if that happens, you can always be like, hey, there's not actually a file there. As it starts to get the ability to, access the internet and different libraries and stuff like that too, it should get better. But you can always, if you're having trouble with it giving you a correct file path, just go grab it from a CDN. And I use CDN.js, which has pretty much every library that I've ever needed to work with in Webflow.
Yeah. And also, if you don't know what library to get, just ask Slater. Like, you can just say, hey, Slater, can you get me, or what library would you recommend? Sorry if you can hear an alarm in the background. But yeah, like, Witt is really good at developing, and he's asking things that, like, he's asking quite specific things. But I do want to reiterate, if you're someone who's like me, who's not so confident with code, ask stupid questions. Ask questions
absolutely.
that, just ask questions like, hey, I don't understand how does 3JS work? And it will literally just tell you. Or you don't need to just ask, give me the code for X. You can ask it questions in order to get you enough information to give a specific prompt when you're ready to do that. Okay.
Wow. I do have one more question.
Shoot.
Okay. So let's say you want to you said it can't connect with the Webflow API and something like that. So let's say you want to create a custom API endpoint that pulls information from the Webflow API, it does something, etc. And usually when you have to deal with APIs, sometimes you have to have a secret key stored somewhere.
Sure. Yeah.
You need to send that secret key so you can do the operations with the API, etc. And it's not safe to store that API key in a file, for example.
Yep, absolutely.
Is it possible to have something like that? Because the way I would do that right now, you mentioned Amplify, for example, and I love how easy it is to create an Amplify function and have things like that, secret keys and etc. stored somewhere, but it's completely inaccessible outside that script. So
yeah.
What do you think?
Generally speaking, I mean, it's not set up to handle environment variables and things like that right now. I think if you were doing Shane Gauthier, I think it's Gauthier, was doing something like Cloudflare worker that was handling, basically acting as a server, an intermediary for him to interact with the Webflow API. But what you can do is you can have the worker, you can basically write the worker in Slater, bring this over into your Cloudflare worker right now, and then have Slater code interact with it like that. But it's not set up for server or key obfuscation yet, although that might be coming. I think if that's something people want, that could be on the roadmap. So.
Well, I definitely want that. So please add to the wish list.
All right. Sounds good.
Nice.
Any other questions, guys? Anybody can unmute yourselves.
I just want to add, I'm really, really thankful for all y'all that joined us today, because it was really, really fun questions and prompts, and I get a kick out of it, seeing it working as much as y'all were. So
yeah, I mean, I just want to say way to go, because this tool is a game changer for everybody that especially loves animation. I see also other use cases with automation happening here with CMS. So yeah, thank you for building this. And I cannot wait what's going to happen as you evolve this tool, because wow.
Well, we're building it for y'all. So y'all, if you want to connect, you can find me on Twitter. I'm input output, and we have a Slater Slack that you can access through the Slater.app channel.